Everybody, you don't know that we're going to ask you to dance today. Just kidding. Just kidding. It's week 2. We can joke.
If I'm correct, we are doing a section on feedback today, so that might fit quite nicely.
Are you going to give feedback on my dancing, Jenny?
Yeah, I will be. Kim and I will be showing you how to give feedback based on Kim's dance skills. Brilliant. Okay, well, welcome everyone. We are at the top of the hour now, and it is good to see you back with us. I am hoping you had a good weekend, bit of a rest in between joining us again and getting ready for the next week ahead. So welcome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we're just going to go through very briefly a bit about what we did last week. It would help if I shared my screen first. It goes a bit skewish. Can you see the PowerPoint? I'm going to open it up to full. Okay, lovely. And I'm going to check again in a second to make sure you can see. Okay, can I get a thumbs up from people who can, or a nod or a reaction? If you want to play with those reactions as well, if your cameras are off, feel free to do so. We like reactions. Okay, so we're into webinar 4. And today, as you can see, last week we managed to cover, you know, sort of really a good starting point. And I think some of the core pieces that will underlie and build in throughout the rest of the course. And today we're really going to look at understanding yourself and others. So we'll be delving a little bit into that area. Oh, let's see. No, just okay. So let me talk a little bit in detail. We'll recap in a minute what we did last week and how that builds into this. But we're going to look at what it motivates us as a manager. Now, if we can understand motivation and what motivates us, it will also help us to understand what might be motivating those that we actually manage. And that's quite key, because we're going to talk about things like professional development and personal development, not only for yourself, but for those that you manage. But actually, motivation is huge. And we need to better understand what keeps people engaged in the workplace, and what makes them want to come into work every day, and what keeps them there. So, and that's for yourself as well, because obviously if you are motivated, others will notice that. So you need to be able to recognize those pieces. Also, listening. Last week we covered a really good chunk of time on communication. And the next stage of that, and that's communication in sense of more verbally or typing, but actually you presenting a communication. Today we really want to focus on hearing others communicate to us. How do we listen? How do we turn it on? How do we hear beyond the words as well? And then finally, feedback. This is really key, you know, and I'm going to use that word trust again, but you know, there's this sort of building that up, and there's different ways to go about doing feedback. But we're going to focus on one particular model that might be some use to you, and just sort of delve a little bit into that. And we're going to be practicing. So for each of these, you are going to have an opportunity to try these things out, and to give them a go. So we're going to spend a bit of time on each of those. Housekeeping. Remember, we start and end on time. It's a new week. I'm sure new priorities have come in this morning. I was up doing the same thing my morning earlier, and but just take a moment, turn off, put that little do not disturb in the notifications section, and really try and be here. If you can, cameras on, love to see your faces. Obviously, we know it's not possible for everybody, but for those that can, fabulous. Name tags, the 3 dots, your name, your organization, and your location. You'll see that Kim, Francesca, and I are all, it's doing that flipping around thing, Kim. But you'll see that we've all done that, so you can see, sort of get an idea. Finally, tell us if we're going too far, stop us. Or if there's an area, and this is something else I would add to this, if there's an area that you want to delve more deeply into, let us know. If there's something you want us to stop and do a bit more on, just pause us, let us know. Can I ask a bit more about that? And we can have a discussion as a group. We want this to benefit you. So you've got to be vocal in what you need from us. I said we would briefly recap, and I've done a bit of that along the way. So last week we really sort of set the scene and some underlying threads that we want to go throughout this course. One of them was situational leadership and how you actually manage sort of where you are with your employees. So the people you manage, your direct reports. And that's kind of key to all of what you're going to do, because when we talk about active listening, when we talk particularly about feedback, knowing what box they sit in will help you to also understand what feedback they may need. So do they need to be more, does the feedback need to be more directive for them? Does it need to be more supportive? That's just an example. Are there motivation? Are they struggling? Are they in that coaching box because they're not feeling committed and they need a little bit more? So again, situational leadership will come throughout. Inclusion and remote management. I can imagine the challenge of doing a feedback virtually. If you didn't have cameras on, even more so because you can't see the person's face. But it's worth thinking about how do you run that feedback, and how do you actively listen to someone sort of when you're so removed from them, and at the same time be aware of the biases you may have in that situation. So thinking about all of that. As I said, communication was a really good one to sort of finish on Friday, because everything that we do now will also impact. So everything you do, you need to do with a form of communication. Whether you're feeding back to someone, you are communicating to them. If you are trying to understand and talk to them about what motivates them, you are communicating to them. So again, that is what we wanted to do, was give you the base, the foundation, really, of management skills. Okay, so I want to now move us on to this week, and we are going to talk about motivation. So the first thing I would like you to do is, looking at this beautiful horizon, can you share with me in the chat one thing? And this is crazy. Something, I'm going to ask you two questions. The first one is, what are the things that motivate you? And Kim should be putting this in the chat for me. I should really open this chat up. Oh, no, you're skipping ahead. Everybody close your eyes. Don't look. Right, there we go. Let's go to chat. Oh, sorry, Nini, I see that. What is the thing that motivates you at work? So have a think about that. And I'm going to ask you another question, which I was giving a bit at, because it's quite a bit of honesty. Hopefully you feel a bit secure in this space to answer it. But what motivates you? Part of a team, yeah, fantastic. Collaboration, community sense, working together, all of that is so key. Yes, working towards a bigger goal, feeling like you're going to have an impact on the world as well as the organization. Hitting goals, getting things done, and seeing them push projects forward, absolutely. And Skylar, you've got the same sort of idea there, which is the feeling of accomplishment. Doesn't it just feel rewarding to know when you've got to the end and you go, done? That is kind of nice. If you're like me, I have post-it notes, and those desktop post-it notes all across, and I just love going to the line and clicking delete. Did it. Beautiful. It's just a nice feeling. We call them, for those sort of things, sometimes they're called quick wins. And I'll tell you now, you need a quick win every so often just to keep you going. Even if it is just sending that, I don't know, email which had a full description, something you needed to do, and you're like, I just got it done. Whew. Okay, collaboration, encouraging environment. Yes, Nikki, that's yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to ask you the next question. One thing that would cause you to leave your job or go to a new employer? This was the one I had a bit of a smile on. This is a bit tougher, but actually it's very important. And this doesn't have to be you. What do you think someone might leave their job for? What do you think someone might go to a new employer for? So it doesn't have to be you personally. Moments on this one, because I know it's not as yeah, opportunities for career growth elsewhere. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, kind of great. Yeah, absolutely. Not feeling valued completely. That is a huge factor. Yeah. Couldn't align with Lyndall. I'm looking at yours. Couldn't align with it. Couldn't see how you fit within that, and it didn't kind of match your own sense. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. And I think there's a few things I want to talk, and I see some more still coming in, which is great. I want to talk about a model that was put together by, and I've got to say his right name, Hertzberg. It was a Frederick Hertzberg. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but he did a two-factor motivation model. And he did this in 1959. That's when the model was sort of put together. Excuse me. Battling a bit of a cough. So in 1959, he put this model together, and it was based on an interview with roughly 200 accountants and engineers about, they were interviewed at the point where either they felt the best, they were at their highest point in the job, or their lowest. So it had to have an impact. And he came up with this. Oh, come on, stay with me. There we go. Hertzberg's theory of motivation. So he had these two factors. One is hygiene, one is motivation. And I challenge this a little bit. I maybe come on, looking at this, I'm thinking I might switch this one out. Let's make a note, because actually I think hygiene is not necessarily job dissatisfaction. It's just a factor that you need to consider. So in this, I would say that you've got the motivator being some of the things that we've already said: achievement, recognition, the work itself, responsibility, advancement, and growth. Now, you can see, I think, from our sector, and also from what some of you have already put down in the chat, that there's a few missing. Values, culture, all of these things that really, sorry. Apologies, everyone. So values and sort of job worth, sense of alignment, as you put there, Lyndall. So things like that are very important. So I think there are some that actually are missing here. And you can see this was sort of very much, they love to use the term corporate America, but it was 1959, accountants and engineers. You can imagine sort of the sort of the workforce population, the demographics at that time, as well as the environment they were in. So I think we could certainly expand this in today. And if we did this with our teams and went back and said, okay, what satisfies you in your job? What motivates you? Add this at the start and then get them to tell you what the other bits are. See what does motivate them. Bring this to them. Jobs hygiene. I think actually this is also job satisfaction, but the reason it's here as job dissatisfaction is because if these are not right, you will most likely leave your job. If you do not have the policies in place, if you are not supported, if the conditions of sort of the working conditions, whether that's in an office environment or whether that's just overload, constant pressure, poor work management from those above you, as well as those potentially who sort of are in a more junior position. Interpersonal relations not working, things like that. So have when was yes, so it was in the 1950s, around 1959. And that's why I said there's a few things that are missing. What's interesting is that if you look at this, it actually is still quite relevant. And that's surprising. given how much we're now in the 21st century, we live in this sort of more values-based culture. You know, we're much more about that. We talked about inclusion, things like that. That's absolutely key to us. So those are the bits I think are somewhat missing, but this stuff doesn't seem out of place either. Okay, so one of the things I would like you to do is have a look through each of these and grab the annotate tool. And on the annotate tool, I would like you to mark what you think are the most important ones. If these are just the ones that we have, so remember, you can use your star and your heart. What do you think the most important factors are to you? So what do you think would apply most? Obviously, you could say all of them, but I'm gonna challenge you. Pick your top two. What if you had to pick the top two? What would they be? And they can be either the hygiene or the motivation. But what are the most important? Lovely, we're seeing some so advancement. Yeah, that's so important, and actually that's a key point for leaving an organization. It's very hard today. I found this within the NGO sector, but promotion is a very challenging part of our sector. We don't tend to do promotion in the same way that maybe other private sector, the private sector does. What we have is where you will go out of the organization to a higher position and then potentially come back into your same organization again at another high position. So we kind of do the sideways triangle move, if you could say. Okay, lovely. So achievement and others like that. Okay, fabulous. So we've got achievement, recognition, but achievement and advancement are very clear. And I love that someone has put security and supervision down here on the left-hand side. Absolutely. Job security, especially today, is so important. Right, we're going to break into groups, and you have 5 minutes, and you're going to have a chance. So remember, no niceties. It's only 5 minutes. Don't worry about doing all the introduction. We've been together for 3 days now. We probably all know our pets' names. We're that close. So don't worry about the introductions. What I want you to do is get into groups. You'll be probably breakout groups of 3. And I'd like you to answer this question. Discuss time when you were motivated or not so motivated at work, and think about the role your manager played in that, whether it was supportive or not supportive. What did they do? Because remember, this is all about learning from others. So can we paste that into the chat just so I can get, is that all right, Kim? Sorry, I'm relying on you so much to do my pasting. But yes, so where were you motivated or unmotivated at work, and what role did your manager at the time play? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. We're all back. Lovely. Okay, let's paste that. Have we got that in the chat? Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Kim and Francesca. Are we all set? So we are ready. 5 minutes on the clock. Does anyone, quick question, does anyone have any questions? Oh, lovely. All right, well, off you go. Have fun.
Here we go.
See you in a bit. Welcome back, one and all. Everybody seems to be swiftly rejoining us. Sort of thumbs up, thumbs down, or any reaction you want. How did you find that? Just sort of thinking about the role the manager plays in motivation and potentially your own situation. Was that something to think about? So using, if you go down to the bottom, and be absolutely honest, if it was a thumbs down, I'm okay with that. You see on the bottom, you'll see reactions. You can select one that is most appropriate to you. But how did you find that exercise, brainstorming? And you see, we've got some thumbs up. Some thumbs up. Okay, so looking somewhat positive. Okay, Nikita, yeah, no, lovely. So one of the things that I think is crucial about any exercise you do where you look internally, it's very important for you to understand yourself and what motivates you and the support you have had. Because one of the things that I have heard, and maybe this is just I'm sort of looking, I'm a terrible Facebook person now. I never used to be, but I think it just gives me a little escape from the world. And I go, oh, I'm doing pretty well in the world when I just look through. But, you know, one of the things that I sort of see these articles, and there's this common thing at the moment around parenting and saying, whatever you had as a child or as you grew up as a parent, there was this some sort of common comment around, oh, well, I'm going to do it different when I'm older, or I won't do that, but I'll do that. And you sort of go through, as you're growing up, I'm going to be different. And when you have kids, for those of you that do, it doesn't apply to all, but certainly you look and you think, oh, and actually it's kind of the same when you've got a manager. Because everything you're experiencing from your manager, you're looking, and it's sort of that parental thing around, actually, I'll do that. I liked that. That really worked. I'm going to copy that. Or actually, I didn't like that. It didn't help me. I want to change the way that happens. So think about that around your motivation. We're now going to talk about active listening. And I'm going to hand that over to Kim now.
Yeah, because if you remember, today is all about understanding yourself and others. So yes, we need to understand what our motivation are. We also need to understand who other people, who they are and what's important to them. And the best way to do that is through listening. If you recall all the way back to last week when we said, what makes a good manager? So many of the things that you said, they see me, they care about me, they give me stretch assignments, all of the things that you said that a good manager does or did, can be directly drawn back to good communication and understanding who you are. And you can't do that without good listening. So show of hands, who here is a good listener? Yeah, most people are like, yeah, if I want to be, if I make an effort, sometimes, but not always. And that is because, listen, Patrick would like, that's good. That's a great answer. The reality is that listening is hard. If listening was not hard, we would never miscommunicate with people because we would always understand what they were saying. Active listening is not just listening to what someone says, but really trying to get at what people mean and what they need. And that's why it's even more difficult. Yeah, Lyndall, that's a really good point. Multitasking increases. How many meetings have you been here? He mentioned we use Slack. How many meetings have you been when you're writing an email or a Slack at the same time? You position yourself very carefully so you can't see what your hands are doing on the screen. We all do it. Our attention spans get shorter. That's why last week when Judith gave the suggestion in a one-to-one meeting with a direct report, showing your hands not only signals to the person that you are listening, but it keeps you out of trouble. So it takes you out of the temptation of slacking. Listening is hard. We know that. Before we even get into what do we do about it, I want to give you an example of what's going to happen, of what it can be like sometimes when we're being asked to listen. So we're going to do a 5-minute activity, and then we'll go in and I'll give you some tips about how to be a good active listener, and then you'll get a chance to practice it later today. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Here is your first direction that requires listening. Copy and paste the chat onto your computer, but let me start again. Copy and paste the link onto your computer, but do not open it. So copy and paste it into a virtual Post-it note or into a Word document, but do not open the link. This is a test to see if you can listen. Copy and paste this onto your computer, but do not open it. All right, I'm now going to copy and paste the instructions for you. All right, you're going to get into groups of 2. Francesca's going to put you into groups of 2. You are going to get a piece of paper and a pen. In your groups, you're going to decide, are you person A or are you person B? If you are person A, you are allowed to click the link. If you are person B, you are not allowed to click the link. If you are person A, you are going to describe the picture clearly without showing it to your partner. The goal is for you to describe the picture so that person B can draw it for themselves without looking. Person B, you're going to listen. This is when my 2-year-old, you're going to put on your listening ears and you're going to listen and you're going to take your pen and paper and you're going to try and draw what your partner describes. No questions, just listening. So no talking. This is 5 minutes. And so as Judith said, no, hi, how are you? We're just going to start to do it. There is one group of 3 people. In the group of 3, there will be person A who is going to click on the link and do the draw and do the describing, and person B and C will both draw. Okay? Questions? Okay.
We are ready. 5 minutes, right?
All right. See you in 5 minutes.
There we go. Okay,
Welcome back, everybody.
So we're back.
Perfect. All right. My friends who are person B, if you can turn your camera on, can you show us what you drew? Not bad. You guys are good. We should have given you a harder one. Wow. Nini's is in 3D. Well done. All right. How did it go? Give yourself a round of applause. That's impressive. I could not have done that. How did it go? For the people who were person A and you were the one who was communicating, how was that?
I felt myself stopping a lot. Like I would start to describe a part of the house and be like, wait a minute, no, let me describe the shapes because it's in a very particular way. So there's a lot of second guessing on my part.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and I think with describing what it actually looked like, I had to, when I would say draw steps, I would have to describe a little bit further to say it doesn't go beyond the structure of like the walls of the house, but kind of above it and how to divide up the window. So you kind of have to think about what that person's like hearing when you're describing it, rather than just saying, okay, draw like the window. You have to kind of describe what it looks like. Yeah.
Yep. How about for those who are person B? For those who are listening, how was that?
Nikita did a great job of going step by step, and it was more on me not jumping ahead because I thought I knew what was coming next. So like you'll see a house that I've crossed out and the stairs were where this happened. She said, oh, and then there's stairs. And then she said, but they don't extend beyond the perimeter of the house, but I'd already drawn the stairs like underneath the door. So I was like, okay, let me redo this so that it's meeting what you've now described to me.
Yep. Yep.
Like that's stopping, waiting to sort of see what comes next and then acting on it.
Yeah. So while you all did a great job, because I can see that you were very close to what the actual image looked like in your drawing. My hunch is that none of them were perfect. And this was the best case scenario. I told you, this is an exercise in listening. You will be listening and you will be speaking to be listened to. It was hard not to ask questions. You knew that you were intentionally trying to communicate a concept, an idea, or an image to your partner. How often, and we've talked about this before, how often are we multitasking while in a meeting, typing in an email or Teams to somebody, asking them to do something and not being so intentional about how we speak and also how we listen? We talked about that when we were talking about the megaphone and the gramophone, of when we're communicating up or communicating down. How much are we communicating our intent in a very clear way? And how much are we listening to receive what that intent is at all times? So listening is hard, that we know. And yet it is also, everyday listening is just one step. The next step is what we call active listening. And many of you have probably heard this term before and practiced doing active listening. But the reality is nobody can listen actively 100% of the time. It's just exhausting. It is. It's too hard. And so my suggestion is always use active listening, your active listening skills, when it's really important. And for me, it's important to use active listening skills when you're having a difficult conversation. And so people's emotions are up and it's important that you get what you want to say across. And when you're coaching, because when you're coaching somebody, when you have that mentor or coach hat on, you really are going to be practicing listening, not just what they're saying, but the underlying meaning of what they mean. So I am going to share my screen right now. And this is probably the most that I'm going to talk for the rest of the week. So what you can do, I actually invite you to turn your cameras off now so you can better listen. And I'm going to talk through 4 steps of active listening. Let me just get something here. 4 steps for active listening. And then you're going to get a chance to practice with Judith what those 4 steps are. So, no, I lost my chapter. All right. So the 4 steps are this. I'm going to talk about the image first. You can see an iceberg. It's like, I feel like any consultant uses this image all the time. It's a very handy image because you can use it in a lot of different ways. But here's the way that I think about it. What people say is like an iceberg. What they say out loud is what we see on the surface all the time. But look at everything that is underneath. All of the motivation, all of the intention is underneath. We hear as managers, I want, I need. That's how it often feels. But we don't hear why they want it, what they really mean, what their true motivations are. Most conversations that we have happen at the surface level, at the I want level. That's the transaction level. But if we really listen, we can sometimes start to get below the surface to understand more. And that's what helps us to find out all of those, the motivation, what they really want, why they act the way that they act, what their motivations are, and most importantly, where we can find a way forward, where we can find where my interests and their interests match, that win-win situation, so we can find a solution. In a difficult situation, that's really important because it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It's a matter of finding a way forward. And if you don't understand why they say what they say or why they act the way they act, you won't be able to find a way forward. And the same with the coaching situation as well. So here is an example. And it's a very simple example, but I hope it will help to illustrate my point. So there was a mother. She had 1 orange and she had 2 children. And the 2 children are fighting over the orange. One of the kids says, I need the orange. I need the orange. They're both yelling. What does the mother do? What are the choices that the mother has? As a parent who just spent 2 full days with my children in the hot sun and they were cranky, I can tell you, you have a few options. 1, you say, no one gets the orange. I'm eating the orange. 2, you can cut the orange in half and they each share. We have to learn how to share, right? There's a few, you can be mean and just say, one kid gets the orange, the other doesn't, and then there's even more tiers, right? But here's what the mother in this story does. Instead, she asks the kids, why do you want the orange? And because she asked the children why they wanted it, it turns out that one kid was baking a cake and he needed the orange rind, the outside of it, to make the frosting. The second kid was thirsty and wanted some juice. If the mother didn't ask the question to figure out why they were behaving the way they were behaving, then nobody would have been happy. But because she asked the questions why, she was able to find a solution. If she had given each of them half of the orange, they would have had half a glass of juice, and half of a cake. And that would not have been satisfactory. Because she asked, they were each able to get what they needed. Now, Yes, it's a very simple, basic story. However, it tells a story about what active listening is like and what the purpose is, which is to find some common ground so that you can come to a solution and move forward. So let's think about all the things that the mother did in that story. The first step to do is called unfiltered listening. And unfiltered listening at its most simple is to listen without responding. Now, that's harder to do than we think. It's hard because most of us spend time when we're supposed to be listening, we spend our time instead forming our response. We all do it. If you were at a party and someone introduced themselves to me, rather than listening to their name, I'm thinking, oh gosh, what am I going to say when I introduce myself? And then I never remember their name. We all do it. We also are usually well-meaning. And if someone comes to us with a problem, we want to find a solution for them. So we're thinking about all of our experiences and all of the things that we can tell them so that we can help them. But it's not about us, it's about them. So to listen without responding means to literally dial back the noise in your head. Stop putting what you hear through your own filter, through your own experience, through your own opinions, through your own perspectives. It's literally saying to yourself, stop and listen. I said to you before, I have a piece of paper on my wall that says stop and listen. And that's what I mean. Dial back the noise. It's not just listening without responding verbally, it's listening without responding with the voices in your head. So that's step one. The second step is to reflect, which means to repeat back what you heard. This is hard to do because especially in a difficult conversation, your first reaction is to defend yourself. If someone comes running into my office yelling at me, I'm not going to want to say, wow, it sounds like you're really angry. I'm going to want to defend myself. But it's important because people need to be heard at their most basic level. Human beings need to feel heard and seen, and that's a gift you can give them as a manager. If you've ever been in a meeting where the same person brings up the same idea every time, oh, Judith, yes, you are interested in this topic. We've heard this before. The chances are that Judith keeps bringing up that topic or that idea because she doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel validated. You don't need to agree that Judith's idea is a good one, but you need to make her feel heard for her to be able to kind of let it go. Also, if you know that you are going to be repeating back what someone says, you are more likely to listen without responding, that first step. If I know that I have to repeat back what you said, then I'm going to be dialing back that noise in my head so I can truly listen. So in order to do that, you want to repeat back the words someone says, but without adding no sarcasm, no irony. It has to be with good intent. And you can de-escalate the language if it is comes to you with anger. So if someone comes at me with angry language, I can say something like, it sounds like you're really angry. Me saying it sounds like you're really angry is not me agreeing with what they are angry about, but it does make them feel heard, and it is reframing what they are saying. Step 3 is to ask questions, to inquire. This is hard to do because someone said it, maybe it was you, Lyndall, said it, Skylar said, it's really hard not to ask questions. And oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. So we think we know all the answers. We think we know what the house looks like. And so we don't ask those questions. But we don't know what we don't know, and we won't until we ask the questions. So the way you want to ask the questions are short and simple. Make them open-ended questions. So if you ask a question and the answer can be yes, no, or a number, that is not an open-ended question. An open-ended question is like, help me to understand why that's important, right? Or we ran into this trouble in the past. How did we get out? What happened then that made it work? An open-ended question. And then the 4th step is to generate ideas, and you cannot judge them. So no bad ideas. Let's come up with ideas about how to find that solution. What's the win-win that's underlying that iceberg so that we can come up with a way forward, whether you're coaching or whether you're in that difficult situation. So 1, listen without responding. Dial back the noise in your head so you're not putting what someone says to you through your own experiences, that filter. Then repeat back what you said, de-escalating, if it's a difficult conversation, the language, so that they feel heard, and to make sure that you're getting it right if it's very important. Ask questions, short, simple, open-ended questions, and then work together to come up with ideas on how to move forward. That's active listening. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of attention. And so what we're doing here is really focusing on it when it's most important. Now, thank you for listening to me. I know that was a good amount of talking, but you're going to get a chance to practice it in a feedback situation in a few minutes. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Judith can take it from there. And you may now, I invite you now to turn your cameras back on.
Please do. Yes. Thank you very much, Kim. Before we move on, I do want to address one question that came up in the chat, if that's okay, because actually I think it's a really good question. What to do in a digital environment? How does this apply? Well, actually, I think this is where it's even more necessary to follow those 4 steps. When you are in a one-to-one with someone and you're using, say, an actual meeting like this on Zoom, on Teams, on whatever, I actually do encourage you to one-on-one have your camera on and give them your full attention. I think what Kim did in this situation was right. There's lots of us, and actually in that environment, it can be distracting. So being able to just focus on Kim and the PowerPoint was right. But if you're in listening to your direct report, make sure that you really try and see each other and listen. The bit that's harder, and this is why I think this is actually interesting for me, is how to do this when a lot of our communication now happens over direct messaging. Well, actually, you can follow the same steps. But what the most common pitfall of direct messaging is the miscommunication. And so point 2 is key. Point 2 and 3 is key. You need to make sure that you are repeating back what you have heard in that direct message. So think of the text you're seeing on the screen as auditory, as in you're hearing it, and actually try and repeat back. So can I just, it's this. Can I just clarify or summarize what I think you're asking? Type it out, that's fine. Then ask questions. No question is silly, particularly in direct messaging, unless it's, I don't know, did you eat porridge for breakfast, in a conversation about something to do with projects? I mean, okay, that's a silly question, but you get my point. Ask questions. It is assumption that you have understood what that person has typed that makes things go wrong. You need number 2 and number 3 are absolutely clear. Yeah, let's just make sure I can hear. And actually, we need to see direct messaging now as that. My final key bit of advice here is never hesitate. You remember I mentioned you on Friday, I think I mentioned it, that we have that 5 Slack rule. 5 Slacks, jump on a call. 5 Slacks. So at any point, get on a call for 5 minutes and you will see the added benefit of being able to really hear. Okay, so I hope that helped. This is applicable, so let's take this on to feedback, because actually feedback happens both in a live situation like this, but actually sometimes what we do is we might put something in Slack and say, oh, Teams, I keep saying Slack because we use it, but Teams or whatever, Skype is still around going, you may actually put something and say, could you share your feedback with me on this? Or your team member might say, how did I do in that meeting earlier? And isn't it funny that we don't ask for our feedback in the moment. We wait till we finish what we're doing, then quietly message someone on the side and said, how did that go? What did you think? Actually, a lot of our feedback is happening in a very direct messaging way. So let's explore feedback and see where we go. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I would like you quick fire, keys on the keyboard. Keys. Fingers on the keyboard. There are always keys on the keyboard. Fingers on the keyboard. First question. What is feedback? In the chat, what do you think? A response to someone else's work. Yep. Okay. A reaction. Yes. Information and observation. Yeah, that's some, I like that. Yeah. And actually, if you tie them all together, got a really nice bit of feedback. So yeah, very, very much so. Okay. Give suggestion, good or bad. Yeah, feedback's also part of that. Remember the generating ideas of active listening. You can do that within a feedback session as well. All of that is tied in. Yeah, did something. Okay, so one of the things that's really important about feedback and what it is again, I liked, and I want to get the name right, Kane. I'm going to say Kane. I don't know if I'm going to apologize if I got that horribly wrong. But it's about giving information regarding the results of a particular action. So someone's done something and you are going to give them information about the outcome of that action. Now, that's just a section of feedback. The next then moves on to performance improvement around that action. Okay, so there's the I'm giving you information, and now let's look at the thing. And someone said the generating ideas as well. Remember, we're still in the stages of active listening here, actually, and this is why they tie so nicely together. Next question: what is the purpose of feedback? What is the purpose? Why? Why do we do feedback? Let's all just sit, ignorantly in bliss. Ignorance is bliss, they say. Let's go with it. To improvement, absolutely. Change or improve. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things, to improve someone's ability or product, and I like this. This is about the improvement sums it up. But actually, there's something a little bit before that. It's actually understanding an outsider's perspective. So the observation of my own actions is very hard, but hearing someone else tell me how they perceive it is much more valuable. So you are providing that outside perspective. You are helping them to see it from a different way. And then that will lead to growth, change, and improvement. And that is the end goal. So it is about improving, but the first step to that and the first purpose is, I just need you to have a different perspective. Think about this outside of your own mind, where you are, you're very involved. Next question, why is it important? Why? Yeah, Kim, good point there. And I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about feedback is that we try to avoid it sometimes because it just feels, and actually, I was going to say, come to that in a minute, because we're going to ask you why is it so difficult. But one of the things that's interesting is it's actually whether it's positive or negative can be difficult giving feedback. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So individual growth and improve, absolutely. Learn, grow. This kind of ties into the previous one of the purpose of feedback. And actually, part of this is also not only growth, but avoiding it going wrong, avoiding injury. So to speak, in the workplace. So making sure that if a situation is looking like it's heading in the wrong direction and could be handled badly, you need to intervene. And feedback is an intervention. Feedback can be seen as an intervention. Feedback is not just wait till it's all done, then I'll tell you. Feedback is intermittent points of going, okay, let's see how it's going and let me feedback. Okay. Bear in mind. Next one, which Kim alluded to. I love it. We're already there. Why is it difficult? Why? Why do we struggle with feedback? I know I do. I really know I do. It's one of my... Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. sense of undermining. Do you feel like you're undermining their ability, their competence level? That's very true. No one wants to deliver negative feedback. Absolutely, Patrick. You know, it's uncomfortable. We don't want to do it. But what's interesting is that we also struggle sometimes to give good feedback. Oh, does that sound genuine? And funnily enough, on the receiving end of that, we really sometimes struggle to receive good feedback because we're going, oh, thank you. Well, it wasn't, and the typical response is, oh, well, it was the team. It was the team. They, you know, they were all, no, receive your feedback, accept it. But yeah, it can be both sides, and actually we can get into the negative feedback. I say negative feedback, but for the growth feedback, where we're asking them to improve in some area, we yes, there can be a sense of confrontation, undermining them, knocking their confidence, and thinking about upsetting them, all of these things. Yes, someone mentioned it, Lindo, the sandwich of compliments. So good feedback, bad feedback, good feedback. Yeah, I think that it does work. I don't think there's anything wrong with it per se, but I do think you could give feedback in a very clear way that allows you not necessarily to have to rely on that. And I think we know the problem now, I find, Linda, is that everybody knows that. So they always go, oh, they're going to give me a good bit of bad news first. They're just building me up. And you know, it's sort of quite common. So yeah, and yeah, uneasy to judge others. We ourselves, as the giver of that feedback, really do struggle with that. And one thing I've already talked about a slightly bit, how would you give the feedback? What do you think would be a good way to give that feedback? Lyndall, you've already shared something. I think that's a great point. It is, you know, finding that compliment sandwich. Yeah, positive. Nikita,
Hi.
perfect. Yeah, Nini.
Sorry, I lost connection.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, your internet's not in a good place.
Connection. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, good, good. I'm glad you're back. Patrick, face to face with honesty. Yes, absolutely. Where possible, that is a good way to give feedback. It's not always possible. As I said, we have fallen into that very of the habit, the behavior of asking for or giving feedback after we've seen something live in a direct message. So how do we get over that? And I think that's, you know, find your own rule in the sense of that 5 Slack or 5 post rule, but something that works for you, just so that your feedback is clear. Making an intentional space for feedback. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to talk a bit about that as to give you some top tips at the end. Oh, knock that bottle over. But one of the key things here is not to leave your feedback to that once a year performance appraisal. That's not helpful, not helpful at all. And anyone, and it becomes a feed, like it just becomes, right, let's just get it. You've got basically a shopping list. You've done your year's worth of shopping in one meeting. Actually, what you want to do is, as I said about that intermittent, do that throughout the year, meet with them. In the moment is when you want to be giving that feedback, in as much as possible, as close to that time. Some of the things I think about, make sure the intention is that you are trying to be helpful. If you are not happy and it's rubbed you the wrong way, I would actually tell you to take a step back, pause, breathe. Don't give your feedback then, because you are not in the right frame of mind to be constructive about how you give your feedback. There's a lot of emotion in there. That's not to say you can lose the emotion, but you know, the old saying of let's sleep on it. I have done that even recently, and I was sort of making a decision. I needed to give feedback on someone, and I had to wait. In fact, I waited the whole weekend. I just couldn't do it, and I needed to really think. So yes, it needs to be timely, but it's also got to be taking into account your own where you're at in your own mind and how you emotionally feel. Clear feedback with private and focus on performance and non-personality. Absolutely, Anzor, you've done it. Specific feedback with focus on the performance, not the personality. This is not you are not judging them as a person. You're judging, not, and I use the word judging, you're not feeding back on them as a person, you're feeding back on the behavior, the specific action or incident or whatever it is, and so forth. So just have a think about that. And we've already touched on it lightly, but when do you think you should give feedback? I think I've already given some of this away, and it's actually already come up a few times, such as the making intentional space. Hold on, Lyndall, not on a Friday afternoon, because actually, and it seems funny, but it's true. If you give feedback on a Friday afternoon, you're not going to see them for 2 days. How are they going to come back to you? Have a conversation. What if they want to follow up? What does that do to your weekend if it's not great feedback? It's good feedback. Sometimes I do leave it to a Friday afternoon and I go, they'll leave for the week feeling on a little bit of a positive note. But if it's going to be constructive, negative, or improving feedback, I actually tend to try, I will, as much as possible, agree with you, Lyndall, in that doing it just before they're about to sign off for a weekend is not ideal.
Judith.
Yeah, sorry, Kim, go on.
I will say remote management makes timing, for me at least, a little bit more challenging. I think you want to be as responsive as possible. And yet there are time lags in a remote, especially in a globalized workforce. Oftentimes you hear about actions that you need to give feedback on from others. And when you're working through direct messages, the chain of events can take longer, in which case it's very easy to say, well, that happened 2 weeks ago. Now it's too late for me to give that feedback. And so it is just something to be, you have to be even more hyper aware, I think, of this is the right time, let's do it. And in order to do that, you need to have all of the skills in your toolbox ready. You can't like psych yourself up and get yourself ready to do it, and it takes more time. You have to be ready and confident enough to be able to give it when that happens, which is why it's so important that you practice in a safe space.
Yeah. And actually, if you are going to be given feedback, so I do this quite often with my manager. I have a very good relationship with him. We have a very good sort of working partnership, if anything, I call it. And I have sent him feedback before that I'd like to share with someone to say, does my tone sound right? Do you remember I said you send it in text sometimes? And I knew I was going to be sending it in a text or a message. I got a brief reading. Can you sense check this for me, is what I've said. And I always get a tone check and a sense check just to say, what does that look like? That's okay to do that. Someone you, I say a word again, someone you trust in the organization that you can lean on to do that. I want to move, because we're going to practice this. But first I want to give you a bit of share with you a model that I think may be helpful to you. And I'm going to talk, before we do that, I'm going to talk about an onion. Yeah, an onion. Can you all see my screen? If I open it, hold on one moment. I can't see any of you as it loads. There we are. Can you all see my screen now? I get a thumbs. Patrick, I see your thumb. Thank you very much. So this is the onion model. Actually, I don't have the reference for it. I should look this up. But this is the idea of change, and we're going to look at change management. But if you have an individual, we have layers. Who's seen Shrek? He's an onion. We all have layers, if those of you have seen that film. And there are three. There's behaviors, there's attitudes, and there's personality. Now, when you are giving feedback or even communicating with someone or trying to make improvements, there are two here that you will not succeed in changing outright. I mean, in the sense of just completely changing. They are personality and attitudes. Personality is something that is embedded, it is within them, it is their own self. Attitudes is very much an infusion of growth. Do you remember we talked about unconscious bias? Attitudes actually comes from that. It's very hard to change. You should be focusing on the behaviors, which is the outer layer. Remember I said when you give feedback, you're giving feedback about an action. That is the behavior. I spot the behavior, I go through. So, this is the model I want you to look at, because this is going to help you. Whenever you do feedback, these are the lines you want. Start off with, be specific about the situation. This is very prescriptive, but I'm going to give you an example. On the 12th of May at 2:30, move to behavior, you, or you could be even more specific, in the team meeting we had, you, ... behavior, you interrupted someone, and as a result, they couldn't share their idea. That's a very basic example, but you get the idea. So I have made it, sorry, this is why I've got 2 drinks here. I have made it completely about the situation. What I did not do at any point was assume their intent. Because remember, we're told always assume good intent. The point of giving feedback is not to then say, well, you're just a horrible person. No, they probably didn't realize, or they don't know that that's a behavior that they're eliciting. So always, when you are, if you have to give a bit of feedback and you're struggling with how you would word it and how you would say it, follow these 3 steps. Situation, we were in that team meeting when you interrupted Jane. I have to go back to Jane. We like Jane. She was our first case study. So Jane, and as a result, Jane was not able to share her idea on a new watering system. So, you know, and that meant that she wasn't able to get backing from the director, something like that. Okay, so I want you to look at this, take note of this, and I am going to stop sharing. I'm hoping you can still see that. So I'm going to stop sharing because I want us to practice. That's the most important part of all this. Practice, practice, practice. You're going to break up into groups of 3. There may be one group of 4. And I would like you to have 3 roles in that group. You're going to have to self-select. You're going to have you're going to only go through 1 round, you know, and do it. So not all going to get each role. So if there's something you're particularly passionate about getting this practice, let the group know. So there's going to be 1 person giving feedback, 1 person receiving the feedback, and 1 person observing. If there are 4 in your group, then please have 2 people observing. So you can think up your own idea, but what I would like you to do is identify and describe an individual or a context where something has happened and you would like to give feedback about it, and you're going to share that feedback. Now, you can think of a situation that you are looking to share in your own scenario, or something that's happened in the past. Now, remember, this is only person A, because you're the only one sharing the feedback. If you can't think of something, yeah, can we post that in the chat for me? Thank you, lovely. If you can't think of something, we have 2 scenarios for you. Oh yes, sorry. Person 2, put themselves in the shoes and how you would like to respond. I'm going to put the scenarios in now, so hopefully this will go. So these are some example scenarios. If you can't think of one, that's absolutely fine. Here is example 1. Your boss is not giving you a definitive answer on the timeline for your deliverables, and it's making it difficult to move forward. This one is interesting because it's giving feedback up. Okay. The next one, I think Francesca's got, I love this. Absolutely. If you could post that in for me, the second one for me, Francesca, that would be great. So the second one is a staff member who reports to you increasingly is demonstrating a lack of motivation. They're just not really involved. They have a slight attitude. There we go. It's in the chat now, thankfully. So you're beginning to get complaints from other staff. So this one is feedback to a junior member of staff. So you can have a pick if you can't think of your own situation. You will have. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. And what I would like you to do is the person receiving feedback, respond. How would you this is really role play. This is really about putting yourself in the shoes, because everything the person B does will help person A practice how those responses are going to happen. Okay, so this is really helping each other out. Does anyone have any questions? To reiterate, you need a person A, person B, and a person C, or in some cases, person D. You're going to have your person giving the feedback, person receiving the feedback, and 2 or 1 person observing. Now, the person observing, afterwards, give your opinion, share what you saw, give your own feedback about the feedback you saw. This is a feedback bonanza, but yeah, share what you saw there. Okay, and as I said, you've got 8 minutes, so just one round, and let's come back together and see how that went. Thank you very much.
Here we go.
Hello. Welcome back. What a way to end a Monday session. Bit of feedback, whether you were a boss or whether you were reporting to someone and feedback up. I would like you, please, I invite you in the chat to post how did that feel? What did you observe, or what was an interesting moment for you? But here's the caveat I would like to ask. Can you, before you put in your feedback, just state whether you were giving the feedback, receiving the feedback, or the observer? So just do that, then put the colon or something or whatever, dash, and then your feedback afterwards. And I'd just like to say, how did you find that? And while you do that, I'm going to share my screen and take you through the final 2 bits, some key bits of advice I would like. As you know, it takes me a while to get the sharing right. Okay. Can you see my screen, Francesca? Can you see it? While everyone's still typing, I will now expand that. Remember to write, what did you observe? What was something interesting to you? Or as we like to call it, oh goodness me, as we like to call it here in Humentum, what was that aha moment? And I am going to open the chat. Okay. Oh, it's jumping ahead. It's exciting presentation. Yeah, great. Thank you, Maggie. Self-awareness is so important and intentional. It's absolutely right. What you don't want in feedback is filler. And what I mean by filler is sort of the waffling around, trying to find the right words, which is why Kim and I were saying when you're in the breakout rooms, practice is what makes this so effective. Because if you don't practice, you will find yourself trying to fill the gaps in your feedback, and it becomes then unintentional. And doing this remotely online means you need to speak slower and leave perhaps an yeah, absolutely, Lyndall, absolutely. The unnatural pauses. I say this in the e-facilitation course, but one thing I learned to do very well was facilitate silence. I had to become very comfortable with silence. And sometimes I will sit here and pause and go, oh, is that long enough? And people start to get very awkward, but that's okay. Give the pause. I sometimes give a warning. I'm going to give you to 10, and you'll find that on the 8th or the 9th, someone says something. Okay, let's have a quick look at that. So observer 2, while the person going to bring up the issue, they offer support to overcome the problem. Yes, Zainab, that's great. Remember, that's the generating ideas section. So you feedback, now you're generating ideas back as the listener, because actually the person receiving the feedback should have been practicing their active listening in that section as well. Okay, once you've shared that, I would like to just offer you some very key tips to take away. Remember, you do have a copy of these slides, so you don't need to type them all up, but try to make it a positive experience. We talked about timing. Timing is absolutely key. Be as close to the time as possible that the behavior or the action took place, but at the same time, remember, be aware that if they are in a emotionally if there is emotionally high situation, or if they themselves are experiencing a bad moment in the sense of how they feel, that is not a good time. Don't lay it on top of them. Time it well, but don't leave the gap. Make it regular. I said intermission. Don't leave it to the performance review. Prepare. If I could put that in massive bold across the top, there's no reason. Think of it as a bit like a performance, and you get it right. Be specific. Yes, absolutely. If you are going to criticize them, try to do it in private. We talked about confidence. This is your opportunity to build their confidence, not take their confidence down. Do that in public. It will absolutely make them feel less in front of others. So you want to try and bring that up. I statements are so important here because this is your opinion. You do not speak on behalf of. Even if you do, you can say, I have noticed, to try and you've got a few things there, and follow up. I like this one because don't just leave it and go away. Come back to them afterwards. How are you doing? Did you notice anything? Before we move to sort of thinking about tomorrow, one of the things I've been asked about is how do you receive feedback? Because actually receiving feedback is quite an integral part. And you should be, as managers or even non-managers, asking for feedback all the time from your reports. All the time. Remember, we talked about the situational leadership. Ask them, am I managing you in the right way for what you need? Again, feedback. So stop the initial reaction. Do not jump straight into it with it kind of, step back, breathe, use your active listening. If you've had enough, you can say no. Okay, thank you. I've heard what you said. I'm going to take that away and I'm going to digest it. I'm going to think about it and stop. That's okay. Again, this is point 2 of active listening. Reflect what you've heard. Make sure it's clear. And also, you can reject it, accept it, or as I said, put it on hold. That's absolutely fine. And finally, actually express that you're grateful for the feedback, because otherwise what you'll do is you'll become that person that everyone goes, oh, they don't like feedback, or they don't like that. You want to be someone who shows that you're grateful regardless of what that feedback is. Okay, that's a lot to digest today. And one of the things I want to, and I know we're over slightly, but I just want to tell you one more time, practice, and practice. Okay, use the SPI, think it through. As you go, if you want to share with us as your last moment of the day before we see you tomorrow, what was your one thing you learned today or you would like to take away with you? Just pop it in the chat, wave goodbye to us, and we will see you tomorrow. Practice. Thank you all so much. As I said, we do look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and we'll let you know what's coming up in the morning.
Well, have a great rest of your day.